الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وسيد المرسلين وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المكرمين الغرر الميامين، سيما بقية الله في الأراضين وحجته على الخلائق أجمعين، سيدنا وإمام زماننا وصاحب نعمتنا وولي أمرنا مهدي هذه الأمة وطاووس أهل الجنة الحجة بن الحسن العسكري، فداه أرواح العالمين. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. The question of how to utilize education in order to instill moral values in individuals and therefore in society at large remains an open question. Despite the many advancements that we have made as a race, despite the incredible progress that we have made in a plethora of scientific disciplines, areas such as mathematics and physics and chemistry and technology, we've been able to conquer the moon, we've been able to discover pretty much all the land that is available on this earth. We have come to learn a great deal about our bodies and how they function. Obviously, there are many things that are left undiscovered, many blanks that need to be filled, there's no question about it, but there's no denying that we've been able to progress a great deal in our pursuit of knowledge and our pursuit of understanding our world in a better way. But one of the things that still remains an open question, that defies humanity's constant attempts at improving and refining, is the issue of education. And specifically, we're not talking about education in the field of the arts and sciences and so forth, but rather on a more meaningful level, on a more relevant level. How do you educate a society to be of good moral character? How do you take an individual at the age of 5 or 6 or 7 and put them in an institution that ultimately brings about a person who is ethical in their conduct? A person who's not going to rob if given the chance, who's not going to lie if given the opportunity, who's not going to cheat if the chance offers itself. In many modern societies, for example, you might say, well, that problem's all pretty much been solved in places like New Zealand and Canada and Australia and Sweden and Denmark. But have we? I mean, it is a known fact that if, in the absence of legal frameworks, in the absence of government oversight, if we are given the chance to steal, most people would, right? They talk about white-collar crime. White-collar crime is when Wall Street investors steal billions of dollars just because they can. Not because they need the money, not because they're poor or they have hungry children waiting for them at home, but because they can. Remember the Bernie Madoff scandal? How much was his hedge fund valued at? It was something like $50 billion or 80, I think it was $80 billion. One of the biggest thefts in history. And that's not even counting government corruption, that's not counting politicians who fill up their pockets at the expense of the public through corrupt business dealings, favors that are awarded to them because they happen to be in a position of authority. My point is that we really haven't solved this riddle. We're nowhere near solving this riddle. How do you educate an individual and therefore society to be good, moral-centric, ethical individuals and therefore societies? But without a doubt, no matter what school you subscribe to, no matter what educational system you adhere to, one thing is for sure, that irrespective and regardless of the syllabus and the instructional material that is provided to create more ethical and moral human beings, the one indispensable tool in all of that is to provide a good example that can be a source of emulation. If you have a doctor who smokes, that doctor could never talk to you about the dangers of smoking. If you have a lawyer who breaks the law by lying under oath, there's no way that lawyer or that judge can be taken seriously. If a judge takes bribes, that is pretty much the end of society and its legal framework as we know it. A president who lies, a king who steals, an emperor who kills is not a source of emulation. In fact, if anything, it causes the opposite effect. It's a famous hadith in which the Imam says, الناس أشبه بملوكهم منهم إلى آبائهم. People resemble their leaders more so than their own parents. In other words, even though you are a descendant of your parents and therefore have their genes dictate much of what you look like, your conduct, your demeanor, the way you act as an individual resembles the state, resembles your leaders, resembles your source of emulation, resembles your celebrities, way more than your parents do. Because ultimately, we learn more from the state, no matter, again, irrespective of which governmental system you live in. It doesn't matter whether it's a fascist dictatorship or a liberal democracy. The end result is the same. The state determines how your personality is molded and shaped. And that's why I talked the other night about public education and how it fails us in providing answers to the most basic and most essential questions that shape the personality of a human being. That is why I'm a huge advocate of establishing private schools or charter schools. And I think, and I'm not alone in this, there are many people who agree with this, I think that one of the top priorities for any community that's going to thrive and that's going to flourish is to have its own private institutions that provide their level of education that conforms to their worldview and their ethical and moral standard. Look at the Jewish community. One of the reasons I believe that they have been so successful, that they have thrived in Western societies, even though they are relatively new immigrants, is because of their private school systems, right? Even if it's expensive, I understand the challenges, I understand the difficulties, but brothers and sisters, going forward, this model is unsustainable. For us to continue to operate the way we are today is a mistake. As I said the first night, or rather the second night, this generation has a very strong chance of being the last of its kind, the last of our generation of believing brothers and sisters who adhere to the moral standards of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. We need our own private schools. Now you might say it's difficult, it's expensive, it's going to take a long time. There is every 1,000-mile journey begins with what? As the old Chinese adage goes. Every 1,000-mile journey begins with one step. Take the first step. Let's work towards building our own private school. Within 10 years, within 20 years, let's start somewhere. Let's go back to the main point and not veer off too much. Ultimately, no matter what educational system, and there are many out there, you subscribe to, we all agree that you need a good source of emulation. If you don't provide that example to your children and to yourselves, then someone else will. Whether it's the government or the media or pop culture. Someone will provide your children with that example and they will follow it because there's a void. It's like the need for food. If you don't fill that need with good, healthy, nutritious sources of food, they will be filled with junk food. Or if you don't provide it with halal food, it'll be filled with haram food. The same applies to having a good example to emulate, to follow in their footsteps. If you don't provide your children with the examples of the Imams and the Ahlul Bayt and Amir al-Mu'mineen, then they will take the Avengers as their role models. They will take comic heroes as their role models. They will take sports stars as their heroes. They will take singers and actors and actresses as their heroes. They will take any random person in school as their hero. The need has to be filled, or it'll be filled for you. Which is why, brothers and sisters, Amir al-Mu'mineen, alayhi salatu wassalam, is the ultimate source of emulation. There's a reason why traditions tell us that the Prophet called Amir al-Mu'mineen Aliyun al-Mizan. According to other traditions, Ali Mizanul A'mal. Other traditions stress that on the Day of Judgment, they will bring Amir al-Mu'mineen and compare and contrast our actions with his. In other words, some have suggested that when we talk about the scales on the Day of Judgment, there is no physical scale. There's no reason or perhaps purpose, according to this school of thought, to have a physical scale to take your actions and turn them into physical objects. For example, greed, envy, hatred. To take those intangible sentiments, turn them into physical objects, put them on a scale, then put all the good deeds on the other end of the scale, and then measure them up and say, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. What does make sense is to have a scale, meaning a unit of measurement. When it comes to evaluating the merits and demerits of our actions, we need a unit of measurement. How do you know, how can you judge whether this prayer that you performed this morning, as-salatul fajr, for example, was good and worthy to be offered in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? You need a unit of measurement. It's like me asking you, what is the size of this rug? And you'll tell me, do you want that in feet? Do you want it in meters? Do you want it in centimeters? Do you want it in cubic feet? Which is it? What's your unit of measurement? And so if I asked you, what is the value of your prayers? What is the value of your fast? What is the value of your respect and honor towards your parents? What is the value of your pilgrimage to Hajj? What is the value of your charity to the poor? Your question should be, according to what unit of measurement? And the answer is, Aliyun al-Mizan. Salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. Ali is the unit of measurement. Ali is the standard by which every act and every deed is measured against. Ali ibn Abi Talib is the scale with which all of us are compared and weighed and measured on the Day of Judgment. Now, if that is the case, then we're in trouble, brothers and sisters. Me being compared to Amir al-Mu'mineen? One act of Ali ibn Abi Talib, the Prophet said, يَعْدِلُ عِبَادَةَ الثَّقَلَيْنِ. One act. And that act was one singular strike of his sword. When he killed Amr ibn Wadd al-Amiri and tipped the balance of power at the critical battle of Ahzab and Khandaq. One act is equal to, or greater rather, than the act of worship performed by al-Thaqalan, meaning al-Jinn wal-Ins, all the sentient beings that Allah has given free will to and has commanded to worship Him. Me being measured against Amir al-Mu'mineen, that's, you might say, well, that's tough. And of course it is. Yeah, he is the standard. He is the unit of measurement. He is the bar, and the bar has been set very high, brothers and sisters. Sallallahu alayka ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. Conversely, let me also add another point that I think is critical here as well, while we're discussing the importance of having role models and examples. Just as important as it is to provide our children with good examples to emulate, listen carefully, it's also important to provide them with bad examples to avoid. The hadith says that one of the problems of Bani Umayyah, society under the Umayyad dynasty was corrupt beyond repair. It was so damaged that it required a sacrifice like that of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn alayhi salam, the ultimate sacrifice. So the Imam says one of the reasons society was corrupted so much, أن بني أمية علموا الناس الإيمان ولم يعلموهم الكفر. The Umayyads were happy to tell people this is how the Prophet led his life. A life of purity, a life of goodness, a life of great moral character and all the rest of it. They were happy with the merits of the Prophet being disseminated. They didn't have a problem with that. But وَلَمْ يُعَلِّمُوهُمُ الْكُفْرِ. They didn't give them something to contrast their actions against. In other words, when it comes to teaching your children, here's a pro tip, if you like, especially if you're a parent or an older sibling. A pro tip is this: when you give your children the example of Amir al-Mu'mineen, also give them the bad example of the enemies of Amir al-Mu'mineen. When they do something bad, tell them, do you want to be like Ali ibn Abi Talib, like Amir al-Mu'mineen, like the commander of the faithful, or like so and so? When you give them these examples, it creates a three-dimensional picture. You need two eyes in order to see in three dimensions, right? People whose eyes are damaged, or if you just close your eye, one eye, if you block one of your eyes, and someone throws an object at you, it'll be very difficult for you to judge the distance of that object towards you. You need both eyes in order to be able to see in a three-dimensional space. You need both tawalli and tabarri in order to be able to see in a three-dimensional space, in order to be able to see the full bigger picture. In order to tell the difference between right and wrong, you need to have an example for both right and wrong. So that's a very lengthy discussion that we'll leave for another day, inshallah. But I think you get a sense of what I'm talking about here. That's why both tawalli and tabarri are part of the branches of our religion, min furu' ad-din. You need them both. Tawalli alone doesn't distinguish between good and bad. When it comes to tawalli, there's almost nobody out there who says they don't love Amir al-Mu'mineen. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, may Allah curse him and bring about his demise, also says that they love Amir al-Mu'mineen. They also say they love the Ahlul Bayt. In fact, he says, أنه حسيني رضوي. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi says that he is a descendant of Imam al-Hussein and a descendant of Imam al-Rida alayhi salam. Of course he's lying. How do we know he's lying? Well, first of all, there's his conduct, his vicious nature, right? There's also his hatred toward the followers of the Ahlul Bayt. And Nasibi, in the texts of jurisprudence, Nasibi literally translates as the one who openly displays enmity towards the Ahlul Bayt. من ينصب العداء لمحمد وآل محمد صلوات الله عليهم أجمعين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. But the term is defined as one who says they loathe and despise the Ahlul Bayt, or those who loathe and despise the followers of the Ahlul Bayt. Those who kill a Shia just for being a Shia. Those who blow up a Shia mosque or Husayniyya or marketplace just for being Shia. فجرنا في منطقة الكرادة في بغداد قنبلة في جمع من الرافضة. You don't know who these people are. You don't know which political party they subscribe to. You know nothing about them. The only common denominator among the victims of most of these bombings is that they are Rafidha, meaning that they are Shi'as of the Ahlul Bayt. That makes him a Rafidhi. That makes him, rather, it makes him a Nasibi. Also, we know he's lying because, let's face it, most people, most tyrants have claimed that they are descendants of the Ahlul Bayt. Remember Hosni Mubarak? He used to say he was a Sayyid. Remember Saddam? He also claimed he was a Sayyid. The king of Jordan today? He's also a Hashimi, allegedly. The king of Morocco also claims to be a Sayyid. And so on and so. Qaddafi also claimed to be a Sayyid and a Hassani. They all claim to be descendants of the Prophet. And that's my point. My whole point rests on this argument that pretty much everybody says they love the Ahlul Bayt. The litmus test is when it comes to tabarri. Do you also disassociate from their enemies, or do you just claim to love them? But also, he loves Ali ibn Abi Talib, but he also loves Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. Loves Imam al-Hussein, but also says, I love Yazid ibn Muawiyah. That's just not how it works. You need both tabarri and tawalli. They're equally important. Now, this is why, in order for us to establish these ethical standards, brothers and sisters, we need to provide our children with the example of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi afdalu salawat al-musallin. Because once you get to know him, you automatically fall head over heels in love with him. And it doesn't take a lot of work. Try and tell the stories of the Imam to your children. I always say this to parents. I say the problem when our children are absolutely obsessed with Spider-Man and Batman and Iron Man and all these pseudo men is that we have failed at providing them with the examples of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. And we have failed because we ourselves need to educate ourselves. Once you introduce your child to Ali ibn Abi Talib, your child will develop this insatiable thirst for the stories of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And so every night you're going to have to tell them a story. Every bedtime story has to be fresh and has to be new. And sure, they'll have their favorite stories every once in a while. They'll ask you for them. But you have to, in the words of Stephen Covey, remember the author of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? He says one of those habits, one of the things that successful people do all the time that keeps them successful is that they keep sharpening the saw, as he calls it. You have to educate yourself. As a father, as a mother, you have to pick up a book and read. You can't just rely on stories that you've heard from the mimbar, because they will ultimately be depleted and they'll come to an end. Keep satisfying the insatiable thirst of your children for the incredible, legendary stories of heroism of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib. Salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. Now tonight, I want to mention one story. And I think that that one story is sufficient to have at least 10 lectures about. It's short, but there are so many lessons embedded within it. The story needs a little context. Kufa was a small corner of the Muslim nation at the time. But it gained significance because Amir al-Mu'mineen turned it from a military fortress, a military camp, into his capital city. Kufa became Kufa because of Ali. So the Imam moves from the holy city of Medina, where he resided, into Kufa, which was the central and most populous and most important city in Iraq. Kufa and Basra. When the Imam moves in, there was a pre-existing palace known today as the governor's mansion. In the United States, they call them governor's mansion. Here, what do they call the prime minister's residence? Probably the prime minister's residence, right? In Australia, the prime minister's residence is at the prime of locations. Beautiful mansion on a hilltop overlooking the ocean, close to Sydney Harbour Bridge, close to the Opera House. Over here, where is it? Anybody know? I have no idea. Christchurch? Wellington, sorry, yeah. The Beehive, is that what it's called? I'm sure it's a beautiful place. In the United States, the governors of each state reside in a governor's mansion. The president resides where? In the White House. Usually, these are palatial mansions, beautifully decorated, beautifully built. They have historical value. There's a lot of upkeep, and there are beautiful places to live. In the United Kingdom, the Queen lives in Buckingham Palace and many of her other palaces and whatnot. There was a pre-existing governor's mansion in Kufa. But when Amir al-Mu'mineen went there, he refused to take a single step into that mansion. Darul Imara or Qasr al-Imara. Instead, there was a parcel of land right next to it, which didn't belong to anyone. The Imam built فَبَنَى بَيْتًا مِنَ الطِّينِ. He built himself with his own two bare hands a little hut made of mud. How can you live in a hut made of mud? I have no idea. How does it protect you from the cold? How does it protect you from the heat? I really don't know. It's the lowest living standard imaginable, even by the standards of that day. He built this little house. He moved in. He delivered a sermon, the very first address he made, the very first press conference, if you like. He said, Ayyuhan nas, O people, I have come here, birida'in wa mi'zar. All I have with me is this mule that I'm riding on, and these two pieces of clothing, a shirt, right, and the wrapper that you wear underneath, two pieces. Then the Imam says, when I leave the city of yours, if I have anything on top of that, if I have any additional wealth that I've accumulated, فَإِنِّي خَائِنْ فَقَدْ خِنْتُكُمْ. The Imam set a precedent. بِأَبِي أَنْتَ وَأُمِّي يَا أَمِيرَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. He set a precedent. He said, as a ruler, you have to live at the lowest possible living standard of your subjects. And that you have no right to enrich yourself. You have no right to increase your wealth as during your tenure, during your time as leader. If I do so, then I'm a traitor. And you have every right to deal with me in a manner that is just and equitable and appropriate. I'm a traitor. In the United States, to this day, if someone leaves the US military, deserts, the technical term is desertion. When a soldier deserts their post and moves to the enemy camp, they're called traitors. Or when someone releases state secrets that might jeopardize the security of the United States, they're called what? Traitor. In other words, it's the worst accusation you can make against someone. And in the United States, the law for desertion is execution. Even though it's been a while since someone's been executed, but the law says that if you desert your post, you get executed. So Amir al-Mu'mineen is giving himself the worst accusations if he was to enrich himself by being the leader. Now, not only did Amir al-Mu'mineen do this, he would then roam the streets and alleyways of Kufa looking for people who needed help and assistance. Now let's just take a moment and talk about this. Brothers and sisters, if someone studies and works hard for 5 years or 6 years or 10 years to get a PhD, you sit down with them, not everyone obviously, but for the most part, the people who get PhD degrees just for the sake of being called doctors, and there are many of them out there, many people that I've spoken to, right? Especially sometimes you have people within the Islamic seminary, the Islamic educational institutions, who move to universities, and I tell them, I say, well, why would you do that? Have you really gone through all of the scientific disciplines within the Islamic Hawza? Have you really studied all the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt? Al-Bihar al-Anwar is a book of 110 volumes. Have you gone through all that? Have you finished the entire course of study that you're now moving on to something that you didn't have in the Hawza? And they'll be very blatantly responding by saying that, no, it's nice to be called a doctor. So I'm only going for the degree. I'm only going for the title. I'm only going for the accolade. And so when you sit down and talk to this person who finally achieves that status, they'll be talking to you with a sense of palpable arrogance and hubris, because he's talking as a doctor. And God forbid once you call him by his first name. He's a doctor. He did everything he could to be called a doctor. Same thing applies to pretty much any title. I'm not just singling out doctors. If you're studying in the Hawza to be called Hujjatul Islam, you have the same disease. To be called Ayatullah, you have the same problem. Imagine if someone becomes a minister. I've had the displeasure of knowing some of these politicians, especially in Iraq and other places. And there was one particular guy who became a minister. When he was a minister, you couldn't even talk to the guy, even though we knew each other from before. But the hubris and the arrogance that now I have a ministerial portfolio. I'm a front bencher. Is that what they call them here too? Right? I sit at the front bench. It's just a bench. Whether it's half a meter in front or half a meter behind doesn't make you a better person, but that's the mentality. So when he was a minister, absolutely inaccessible. His own personal best friend, if you wanted to call him, you'd have to go through 100 hoops, and eventually you wouldn't be able to reach him. A few years passed, a government transitioned, his tenure, his term ended, and he became the same old guy that you would see in the majalis and the events and programs. But the most striking thing about him was how much he changed from being that arrogant individual who had guards and security personnel and a convoy of cars accompanying him everywhere he went, especially in Iraq. Na'udhu billah. God forbid someone becomes a person of notoriety, a person of authority. You see a convoy of armored personnel carriers. If they could make tanks go as fast as their car, they'd probably have 50 tanks going along with them. So what? You're a prime minister. So what? You're a minister. So what? You're the leader of some faction. What happened to your religion? What happened to your values, your morals? You used to pray Salatul Layl, for crying out loud, and look at you now. You're the biggest thief in town. But in order to fill that void, they have 50 cars behind them. Guns blazing, guards everywhere. The transition was incredible, because now this guy is no longer a minister. So when you sit down with him, he's so humble all of a sudden. It's almost like he's shy, he's embarrassed. And one of my brothers used to say, SubhanAllah, look at this guy. He looks like those supermodels who have built their entire careers on their beauty, on their physical attraction. But now they've grown so old, skin wrinkled, no longer the beautiful model that she was before. So she's lost really the only capital that she ever had. The only thing that kept her in as an object of desire in society is no longer there. And so they feel so empty and so lonely and so dark. The minute you become famous and important is the moment you will start thinking about putting up obstacles between you and others. That's how the human mind works. You become inaccessible. If you're rich, you become inaccessible. If you're a man of authority, you become inaccessible. But not Ali ibn Abi Talib. Sallallahu alayhi ya Amir al-Mu'minin. Yamshi fi aziqqat al-Kufa. One day, Al-Miqdad ibn al-Aswad al-Kindi didn't have food at home. So he left his house looking for something. And as he's walking, he says, I noticed Amir al-Mu'minin standing fi harr al-Hajir. Anyone who has ever visited Kufa or Najaf around this time, or in the summer season, knows exactly what I'm talking about. The heat is simply unbearable. Right? We're talking about 50 degrees Celsius. We're talking about heat that can fry an egg in a matter of few seconds. He says, I saw Amir al-Mu'mineen standing there at midday at the scorching heat. I saw him, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, Mawlai, ماذا تصنع? What are you doing in this heat? So the Imam said, لعل طالب حاجة. Maybe there's someone who needs something. Perhaps someone needs to speak to me, needs me to do something for him. This was Ali ibn Abi Talib. Anyway, let me get to the story itself and wrap up. The Imam is walking in the street, again, like he did. No guards, no convoy, no entourage. He hated having an entourage, right? Sometimes you see people, even a speaker becomes a little famous. Now he can't just walk into the hall by himself. Oh no, he needs 5 or 6 people to surround him. Why? What's wrong? Who do you think you are? Ali ibn Abi Talib is walking. He looks back. He hears people walking behind him. So he looks back. He sees a bunch of his companions. He had these fida'iyun. People like Maytham al-Tammar, Malik al-Ashtar, Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr. These are people who wouldn't just abandon their Imam. The Imam would look back and say, what are you doing? Do you have alakum haja? Do you need something? I'm here to help. They said, La ya Amir al-Mu'minin, namshi khalfak nahrusuk. No, we're just here to guard you. We're just here to protect you. So the Imam said, no. If that is why you're here, then you should leave me alone. فَإِنِّي أَكْرَهُ خَفْقَ النَّعْلِ مِنْ خَلْفِي. I would hate to hear shoes flapping on the ground behind me. Because that in itself makes you arrogant. Hearing people walking behind you. a Jewish man walks into the city. He says, I have important official business and I want to speak to your king. They said to him, well, he's not a king. He is Amir al-Mu'mineen though. He said, well, where do I find him? Who do I have to talk to? Who's his secretary? How do I contact his office? They said, well, we really don't know what you're talking about. There is no secretary. There is no office. Well, where do I find him? They said, well, maybe you should go out there behind the mosque. So he goes outside. He goes to the area he was pointed to. He sees a palm tree, and underneath it, there is a lonely man who's taking a nap under the shadow of the tree. يَنَامُ تَحْتَ ظِلِّ النَّخْلَةِ. He saw him. He's like, have you seen Ali ibn Abi Talib? How do I find Ali ibn Abi Talib? The Imam said, أَلَكَ حَاجَةً. I'm here for you. How can I help you? He said, عَدَلْتَ فَاطْمَأْنَنْتَ. You are Amir al-Mu'mineen. You are the conqueror of the East and the West. You are the leader of the free world. You are this, you are that. And here you are sleeping, taking a nap under the open sky, under the shadow of this tree, with not a care in the world, not a worry in the world. Aren't you afraid of someone trying to assassinate you, someone trying to kill you, having made so many enemies in your career through your justice and through your equity and through your goodness and through your kindness? Surely the evildoers won't like you. Aren't you afraid? He said, why would I be afraid? Why would I be afraid? He said to his daughter Zainab alayhi salam on the eve when he went out, just like this morning, when she told him, Ya Abba, why don't you take along Akhi al-Hasan or al-Hussein to protect you? You've been saying things that are worrisome. Why don't you take one of my brothers as a protector, as a guard? The Imam told her, why would I need him? To protect me from the heavens or protect me from the earth? In other words, protect me from the danger of humans or to protect me from God's destiny. If it's from God's destiny, then nothing can protect me from Him. And if it's from people on this earth, I have never fled from anyone. And I'm not about to start now. I've always faced my enemies directly. I've never run away from anyone or anything. So Ali ibn Abi Talib is walking by himself. Now, here's a really important point that I'd like you to ponder. Amir al-Mu'mineen, in the words of George Jardaq, he says, Ali ibn Abi Talib bahrun لا يحركه شيء جبل لا يهزه هواء ولا عاصفة. Ali was like an ocean. Throw a mountain in an ocean and the ocean wouldn't change the slightest bit, right? Take a mountain and hit it with the biggest cyclone, it wouldn't move the slightest bit. That was Ali ibn Abi Talib. والله لو تظاهرت العرب على قتالي لما وليت منهم فرارا. He says to Uthman ibn Hanif. He says, if all the Arab tribes, notorious for their barbarity, if they all came and somebody told me that they're all now charging against you, imagine, tens of thousands of sword-wielding soldiers, لما وليت منهم فرارا. I would not, my heart's palpitations wouldn't increase by even a single beat. I wouldn't be afraid of facing them. Ali ibn Abi Talib was unshakable. Ali ibn Abi Talib was immovable. Ali ibn Abi Talib was this giant, and yet the cries of an oppressed woman would shake him to his very core. Nothing could shake him, not the biggest warriors, but a child who was deprived of love and compassion would shake him to his core. جمعت في صفاتك الأضداد ولهذا عزت لك الأنداد. Ali ibn Abi Talib had these contradictory character traits. What made him unique was that he was so contradictory. There were these antithetical traits within him that could never come together in a single human being. How? Zahidun, hakimun. He's both an ascetic who has no regard to the pleasures and indulgences of this world, while at the same time he is the undisputed emperor of the entire free world. How could these two come together? It makes no sense. Zahidun, abidun, shuja'un, halimun. To be brave, to be fearless, to be courageous, you have to compromise on your sentimentality. You can't be both sentimental and easily moved to tears while also be the bravest person on the battlefield. You just can't have it both ways. It has to be one or the other. But that was Ali ibn Abi Talib. What else? Zahidun, hakimun, shuja'un, halimun, nasikun. Amir al-Mu'mineen is the same person who is the ultimate warrior on the battlefield. But at night, you hear him crying all night long. Nasik min al-nusuk. Crying out of fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Imam is walking, he comes across this woman who is sitting by the side of the road and she's in tears. Now that moves Ali. I don't want to go off on too many tangents, right? So I'll make this quickly, inshallah. The Imam comes across this woman. He says, Ya Amatallah, ma biki. He stops everything. The emperor, the king, the leader, drops everything, comes to this woman. What is wrong? Please tell me. She says to him, إن أهلي قد بعثوا بي لكي أشتري تمرا. My family sent me to buy some dates. I went and I bought the dates, but when I took them back home, the family or my boss or my master or whoever it was said to me that these dates are no good. You have to return them or replace them. So I took them back to the seller and I said, my boss wants you to take these dates back or replace them. But he refused. So now I can't go back home because my boss said to me, you're not coming back if you don't give these back and take the money back. And the seller won't replace them or take them back from me. So I'm here stuck not knowing what to do. Now, Amir al-Mu'mineen could have easily delegated this to someone else, right? I mean, the emperor doesn't have to go run some errands. The king doesn't have to attend to every single person's grievances. That's not how politics works. That's not how government works. Except in the government of Ali ibn Abi Talib, where God's divine justice was put on display for everyone to see and to get a snippet of. Ali ibn Abi Talib doesn't delegate. He takes it upon himself. من مشى في حاجة أخيه المؤمن. Anyone who tries to help and relieve a brother or a sister by providing them with what they need, by helping solve their problem, كان الله له في قضاء حوائجه. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will solve your problems. Zakatul jahi badluh. If you have any respect in society, if the community honors you, then you have to use that respect and honor for the benefit of other people. That's how you give zakat. That's how you grow it. Ali ibn Abi Talib himself does it. He says to the woman, let's get up and go and speak to that seller. By the way, the hadith says, إِنَّ الْمُؤْمِنَةِ, a believer is one who doesn't take matters of financial transaction too seriously, right? If you sold something to someone, you sold a car, then the person came back and said, you know what, I've changed my mind. That's okay. Even though you might be within your right not to do an exchange and not to take the car back and pay the person the money that they gave you, even though it might be within your right to do that, just take it back. It's called iqalatul mu'min. Iqalatul mu'min is something that, in addition to having a lot of thawab attached to it, I have personally seen people who have benefited immensely from the blessings of doing iqala. Right? When you sell, be lenient. When you buy, be lenient. Don't be overly strict. Why is it, brothers and sisters, that Muslims getting into business in the West has become a stereotype in how difficult it is to deal with Muslims? Why is it that Muslims have built such a bad reputation when it comes to buying and selling, and God forbid sometimes even scamming and so forth? Be lenient. Be well-intentioned. Anyway, the Imam goes to this man. He says to him, Ya hadha, this woman was crying. She wants to take her money back and give you these dates. Why don't you do that for her as a favor? The man didn't recognize Amir al-Mu'mineen. Now, here's another point. As a leader, as a person of authority, you would want everyone to recognize you. That's why wherever you go, no matter what country, no matter how democratic, you see the picture of the president, you see the picture of the leader, you see the picture of their politicians and people of authority, people of prominence. You see them posted everywhere, right? Back in Saddam's time, there was something like 25 million pictures and sculptures of him all over the place. Now it's pictures and sculptures of other people that have come and taken his seat. It's pretty much the same. I mean, in this regard, it's the same. Whether it's a suit and a tie or a turban, whether white and black, it's the same. You want to be recognized. You want the recognition. You want the honor and the respect. Not Ali ibn Abi Talib. Which is why most of his own subjects didn't recognize him. One hadith says, listen to this. He says, ذهب أمير المؤمنين لكي يشتري شيئا. I don't know what it was, dates or whatever. فسأل البائع. He asked the seller, يا هذا هل تعرفني? Do you know who I am? So the man said, نعم أنت أمير المؤمنين. I saw this hadith the other day. Yes, you are the commander of the faithful. فمضى إلى صاحبه. So he left that guy, went to the next guy, the next shop. He said to him, هل تعرفني? Do you know who I am? He said, نعم أنت أمير المؤمنين. Of course, you are the commander of the faithful. فمضى إلى صاحبه. So he left him, went to the next shop. He said to him, هل تعرفني? قال لا. فاشترى منه بضاعته. He bought the product from the guy who didn't recognize him. They said to him, يا أمير المؤمنين, well, why? He said, because I didn't want him to give me a discount. If he recognizes me, he's going to give me a discount. I don't want the discount. I want to be treated like everybody else. So this person, the date seller, didn't recognize Amir al-Mu'mineen. The Imam didn't go out with guns blazing saying, I am Amir al-Mu'mineen and by the power vested in me, I command you to do this and that. No, he just asked him, one man to another, one human being to another, appealed to his decency, which he didn't have. And he said to him, this woman is oppressed. Look at her. She's stuck between a rock and a hard place. She can't go back home and she wants to give you these dates back. Just take them. He said, I'm not going to do it and I don't care what you say. And then he pushed Amir al-Mu'mineen. Allahu Akbar. Here, Amir al-Mu'mineen was not angry up to this point. And here's another thing about the Imam, is that his anger was never impulsive. His anger was never aroused because he was insulted or because someone wronged him. His anger was always reserved for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now that this woman, this helpless individual is being oppressed, Ali's wrath and anger will have to come and present itself. So the Imam showed him anger. And he said to him, how dare you disrespect and dishonor this woman? How dare you not show mercy to her when I'm asking you, I'm telling you, she's crying and you can see that? There was a bit of an uproar. People gathered around to see what was going on. People went up to this man and said, do you know who you just pushed to the ground? This is Ali ibn Abi Talib. This is Amir al-Mu'mineen. This is Asadullah al-Ghalib. So the man realized who he's dealing with. فوقع على رجل الإمام يقبلها. سامحني اغفر لي يا أمير المؤمنين. Forgive me. The Imam said to him, I will forgive you if you start treating people better than you have treated this woman. If you want my forgiveness, fine. Just give this woman what she wants and be a better, more decent human being moving forward. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the ultimate blessing in this life, and that is to be introduced to the light and the example and the morality and the character of Amir al-Mu'mineen. To make Amir al-Mu'mineen our leader, not just by name, but by action and by example, insha'Allah, for ourselves and our children and our descendants until we meet him on the day of judgment, insha'Allah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. صلى الله عليك يا مولاي يا أمير المؤمنين. صلى الله عليك يا أول مظلوم يا أبا الحسن. ساعات عصيبة مرت على آل الرسول منذ خبر الصاعقة. الكوفة تبكي الرجال يبكون النساء ينوح الأرامل والأيتام والمساكين قد تيتموا. كم من مسكين قضى هذه الليلة هو علي لا يطرق بابه يحمل على كتفه المؤونة. كم من يتيم قضى ليلته وإمامه لا يسأل عنه لا يمر على داره. لم أنسه إذ قام في محرابه وسواه في طيف الكرى يتمتعون. فانسل يستل ابن ملجم سيفه وقف ينظر إلى إمامنا وهامته قد انفلقت بسيفه المسموم. فتح إمامنا عينيه نظر إلى ذلك اللعين، قال له كلمة أجهش القوم لها بالبكاء. كل الحاضرين بكوا على مظلومية أمير المؤمنين. ايش قال الإمام؟ قال له أو بئس الإمام كنت لك. الإمام ابتاعه شراه، كان عبدا اشتراه فأطلق سراحه، أغناه بالمال تولى أمره. أو بئس الإمام كنت لك. فأجابه اللعين قال يا علي أو أنت منقذ من في النار؟ فانسل يستل ابن ملجم سيفه متخفيا والليل داج أنمعوا والمسلمون تزاحموا في أخذه وعليه قد سلوا السيوف وشرعوا ونعاه جبريل ونادى في السماء وعليه كادت بالنداء تتقطع اليوم أركان الهدى قد هدمت. اليوم أركان الهدى قد هدمت. اليوم شمل المسلمين موزع. اليوم قد قتل ابن عم المصطفى. اليوم قد قتل الوصي أنزعوا. لم أنس زينب مذ رأته وجسمه. لم أنس زينب مذ رأته وجسمه من فيض مفرقه الشريف ملفع. فغدت تخضب شعرها يا بدمائه. فغدت تخضب شعرها بدمائه وعليه تبكي بالدموع وتجزع. مشهد واحد يقطع القلوب حينما حمله أولاده الحسن والحسين العباس ابن الحنفية. إمامنا لم يقدر أن يقوم من مكانه. كيف بأبي هو وأمي والدماء تسيل على وجهه وقد اخضبت لحيته من دم هامته. حمله أولاده جاءوا به نحو الدار. حينما وصلوا قريب الدار وإذا بالإمام يأمرهم أن ينزلوه حتى يمشي على قدمه مراعاة لقلب زينب العقيلة حتى لا ترى أباها محمولا. فلما نظرت إليهم العقيلة هذا لسان حالها ايش قالت؟ حنت ونادت يا المجبلين، حنت ونادت يا المجبلين هالشايليه وياكم مني. ولما سمعها الحسن وحسين نادوا يا زينب زيد لونين، يا نادوا يا زينب زيد لونين، ابوك انطبر والراس نصين، يا ابوك انطبر والراس